usually unusual that we will be discussing any articles with a political context, right? So today we are picking one article which has a huge political context, and it's important to talk about this topic from multiple lens. And the takeaway for this discussion is definitely not for prelims. If you are looking at it from that perspective, is it from mains? Yes, maybe for essay and ethics. And if you want to see it that way, even for prelims. I'll start this discussion with the context. Do you know this name? Who is this person? Sorry? New York mayor. Okay. Who is the mayor of Hyderabad? Why are you laughing? I just asked you a question. Who is the mayor of Hyderabad? Okay. What is her role? What is the poll promise of mamdani? Anyone? Free bus. Did they copy Congress Party manifesto? Free bus? Anything else free? Affordable housing. We're talking about New York. See, there are so many contradictions in this entire discussion, because I would want to keep this interactive today, not because this has direct relevance for exams so that you can copy and take down notes. No, it's about training your thought process with a certain set of questions so that you can form a opinion. Okay, so I want you to answer. Why was that smile visible on your face when I asked you who is the Hyderabad mayor? I want an answer for that first, because the answer can probably expose the most fundamental problem with urban governance in India. What is that? Exactly. Let's talk about mamdani versus X. X here is the head of any city in India. Any idea which is the largest municipal corporation in India? Behind Mumbai Corporation, Municipal Corporation. What is the largest corporation in Asia? Any idea? Did you ever think of these topics at all? Do you know the budget of Hyderabad Municipal Corporation? Are you aware that even Municipal Corporation of Hyderabad gets a budget? Or do you think it's the MLA giving roads as a poll promise? So let's begin the problem statement number 1 that is relevant for UPSC aspirants. The fact that even UPSC aspirants, the only people who would care about knowing current affairs in this country at this point, they are also not aware of who is the mayor of the city they are preparing in, but they know the mayor of New York. How many of us have passports? I don't have a passport. We don't even have a passport, a lot of us. We have never been to New York. The only exposure to New York is probably through some television or through 9/11 attacks. So, how is it that we know so much about a city where we have no connection with and yet know so much about? So, problem number 1 is we don't know who is the head of the governance structure in our cities. So, what does it tell us? It exposes the most fundamental problem of urban governance, that is, no representation, no direct representation for the elected. So, if that is the case, how do you think we will be able to solve the problems of urban governance? This is the first takeaway. Now, problem number 2. This is from the standpoint of urbanization. But when you're talking about urbanization here, it is as a social phenomenon. What do you mean by a social phenomenon? Any idea? Can you articulate in words? What is a social phenomenon? It's a consequence. What is a social phenomenon? Forget the word urbanization. A process that happens in the society. What does society constitute? It deals with what? Social structures, social relations, institutions, and finally there is a element of hierarchy, social hierarchy. This is a sociological phenomenon. When I talk about urbanization as a sociological phenomenon, does it have anything to do with politics? That is question number 2. Urbanization, the culture of an urban area and its relevance to politics. Okay, that is the problem statement number 2 that we have to understand. Problem statement number 3. Our inability to recognize the importance of culture as a soft power even in a city. Culture as a soft power is not recognized. Okay, this is the problem number 3. Fourth, as the article suggests, we need to know how we can use this global incident to take lessons for India. So, in India, the takeaway, according to the article writer, is it has lessons for the opposition. Why do you need opposition parties? The quality of democracy is enriched by accountability and raising important questions, which, according to the article writer, is missing now. The quality of opposition is bad because they're not asking the right questions or it is not resonating with the public. Okay, this is the next problem we have to deal with. Finally, a question. Do you think a mayor has any say in foreign policy? Should a mayor have a say in foreign policy? Will is a different question. Should is a different question. Will a mayor have a say? No. Let's say mayor here or local government head. Foreign policy will? No. Should? We don't know. Can? Yes. Can a mayor have a say in foreign policy? Every citizen can have a say. Should he have a say? We don't know. We have to form an opinion on that. This part. Will he have a say in foreign policy? No. Okay. So let us all now use this context completely to address each of this problem statement and form an opinion about urbanization, culture in an urban center, governance systems, its impact on soft power, and how it can impact the global positioning. As the head of the such city, what will be the impact both in terms of the political influence as well as the psychological influence this present context and the present person will have. Okay, this is the scope of the discussion. Why are we discussing this? Because we see cities as engines of growth and we are demanding that we need urban local government that is self-sufficient and also not just self-sufficient. Just like in the case of New York, we want a global level impact. How do we develop cities as those cultural hubs which will facilitate this kind of a image and reach, that people don't know their own mayor but they're curious about what is going on in a global city like New York? These are the kind of lessons that we need to learn from this incident. All right, let's begin. Problem statement number 1. We don't know who is the head of our urban local bodies. What does this tell you? This opens up the dimension of direct election of mayor, which is a contentious issue for our Indian government or Indian governance rather for almost 2 decades now. Elected mayor as an issue has been persisting for a very long time. So what is the present setup? There are 3 tiers of government. center, state, and local. 73rd and 74th amendments created this local governments at the at the village level and at the city level respectively. But the problem is, despite having an election, the mayor or the representative who is supposed to have the executive function is indirectly elected. He's just a ceremonial head. So there is no accountability that citizens can ask, which is the main problem in Indian cities today. When Indian cities, let's take the case of Hyderabad. You know the spread of Hyderabad. Initially, it was 220 kilometers, somewhere around 1970s or 80s, maybe 90s, 90s. Today, as of now, it is more than 600 kilometers, square kilometers. The circumference I'm talking about. And we are planning to push the boundaries through infrastructure projects like the regional ring road. Is it sustainable? Integrating different villages within the fold of Hyderabad, is it sustainable? I'm not just talking about Hyderabad. It's a relatable example. That's why I'm giving you Hyderabad's example. Same is the case with Delhi, NCR. Initially, it was only the old Delhi. How many of you know that the city of Delhi, as we know at the time of independence itself, is a combination of 7 different cities which were built at different points of time in our history. If you take a look at the history of urbanization in this country, it's never planned or organized. It's just a culmination of our history. Should it continue like that? That's the question. So, the answer to that question of how we can have an organized, accountable administration in the cities will start with this reform. So, if you're giving the mains exam or your interview, I would want you to take a stance of yes for a mayor election. It has its own set of flaws, but it is the most practical thing to do. Democracy also has its problems. But can you suggest an alternative? This is what you should be focusing on. Okay? This is the problem number 1 we should be dealing with. Problem number 2, urbanization. We have had multiple such problems, right? Multiple such issues. If you want to talk about urbanization as a social phenomenon, in our traditional social structures, let's say for example the problem of caste or gender or family as an institution, marriage as an institution, they all have a certain place in a Indian society. If you take a look at urbanization as a social phenomenon which is disrupting the traditional values, there is a social change which will create a new culture. UPSC has a tendency of asking that transformation as the basis for urbanization based questions in society. So that is what you should look at. How did New York evolve as a society because of its, the image that it has today is that of a free market cosmopolitan culture where every culture is accepted. It's like salad ball theory, you have that, right? How did that culture come into existence? Because of a factor called migration. So, if India were to become a thriving hub, the bare minimum we can evolve into is a hub that allows internal migration without urban centers being the centers of exclusion. We don't want a site where Antilla, which is the house of Ambani, lying next to a urban slum. That single image is the representation of the paradox that India is. So how can we better implement this urbanization process for the future economy? Because we want cities, but not in the way they are right now, because that's just not sustainable. And we have lessons from his election. The election promises reflect the problems, universal nature of human problems, no matter how rich that economy is. That gives us the lessons for our urbanization as a sociological phenomenon. So, how do you want your sociological phenomenon to look like? Obviously, for the sake of your answer, you'll say inclusive. We want safe, clean, inclusive urbanization. But the question is how? The answer is very simple. Can anyone tell me? Yes. I want some answers from you, because let's not make this a current affairs class. How can we have inclusive Sorry? Give me a holistic answer, not just capitalism. Okay. Yes. What else? Okay. What else? Do you have a vision of how a city should look like? That is what I'm asking. Please tell me. Who pays for this? Okay, let's talk about the financing part later. Tell me, how should a good city look like? A futuristic city. Decentralization of what? Decentralization of? You mean to say spatial spread? Decentralization is a word used in decision making. So, equitable spread of infrastructure is what you mean. Okay. What else? Eco friendly. Okay. Decision making. Same thing. Grievance redressal. So, we all know what it takes to build a very good city. But why is it not happening? Any fundamental problem that you can see? See, for us, we don't have direct election. What about New York? Inequality. Is inequality the reason why we are not having a good city? Or is it a consequence? Or is it a vicious cycle? It's a vicious cycle. So, how do you stop this vicious cycle? Is there any logical way to stop this vicious cycle? Independent management. Rightly identified. If this is your problem, you figure it out. That is the meaning of democracy, right? How will democracy evolve when you don't have accountability or representation? At least now, if some things are bad, you see a phenomenon where this inequality is manifesting in urban centers across the world. The other day, we spoke about London. Same thing is happening in Rio. Where do you see Rio? Brazil. New Zealand. It's happening in New York. What is the significance of these parallel events across the world? You have to understand the underlying common problems of humanity. When you have extreme concentration of wealth, it will also instigate social discontent. There is another debate the other day. Elon Musk is promised over the next 8 years $1 trillion package. 1 trillion. Do you know how much that is? You know how many zeros are there after one in a 1 trillion? 12. Did you actually count it? 12 zeros. Is it justified? The market economy says yes. The socialist economy says no. If you go by numbers, the socialists should win. But if you go by like reality, it is always the capitalism. How do you balance this both? Again, the answer is democracy. Whether we like it or not, the takeaway from this discussion is that there is no other solution than democracy. And democracy is inherently slow. And you cannot deny migration. You cannot deny social change. You cannot deny cultural values transforming from time to time. How else will you explain in New York the first South Asian mayor who is a Muslim? It's a symbolic paradox. In the same center which had the 9/11 attacks, which started the global war on terrorism, which made Islamophobia mainstream, have a Muslim mayor. How did this happen? And that too, who is a socialist, who is a democratic socialist. You can have a democratic capitalist too, but no, he's a democratic socialist who talks about the state paying up for reducing the inequality gap. So the problem is, how do we encourage meritocracy and at the same time ensure there is no discontent for the basics? This gap will always exist. This relative deprivation will always exist. So are you saying that the quality of life did not improve in New York from the Second World War till now? It did. But the fruits of the development are not accessible equally. And this is the major problem. This brings us to the second problem, like the conclusion of the second problem. Urbanization should be inclusive and the process is direct election, where the processes are participative and accountable. From the side of the administration, they should have accountability from time to time. Going back to the basics, I'm not talking anything new. This election and the global image that it has brought us back to the most basic stuff. Whether it is Hyderabad or New York, the promise is the same: free bus. Now it all depends on your evaluation of the outcome of this promise. By providing a free bus, what social objective are we trying to achieve? Or what social injustice are we trying to plug? Unlike in Hyderabad or other centers of India, urban centers of India, New York is a global hub financially, culturally. And the products that New York and its culture creates through politics, through economics, through culture have a global outreach. Manhattan is a very well-known name across the world because of its reach. That single street has such a high reach across the world. What happens in Manhattan can be captured across the globe. That is the significance. So, if India were to succeed in creating that kind of a global reach, it's not going to happen just by building tall structures. It's not going to happen. It is important. Infrastructure is important, but it's not going to happen only through that. We need to empower our population to create that kind of a global level product too. So, cities as the centers of global innovation is the next takeaway from this discussion, all in the context of making the city much more inclusive. So, today, like we were discussing the other day, like in the last 5 years, there were middle income residential complexes that were brought out by realtors. For the first time in India, the top 5 realtors did not start any project and they don't intend to start any project that will cater to the middle class. It is only the rich and ultra rich luxury products that are coming out, which will further amplify inequality. As a market player, they are right in where they are going. But what is the role of the state in plugging that gap? If we don't address that, it's going to come back in different ways. It will have its consequences. As you can see in this reality of this election, where a conservative, pro-capitalist city, which doesn't care about any socialist ideals, it is the same hub where the president of United States made so much wealth. They were decimated, literally ousted from power. That is the power of democracy. And Indians are fundamentally denied that power in urban centers, which is a major problem given the fact that almost more than 50% of our GDP will come from cities in the future. So, the asymmetric power hold that, let's say, someone with real estate power on a city like Hyderabad, they will have a hold on the rest of the state because they control wealth generating area. And you have nothing to do with it. Like, you can't do anything about it. That's the paradox of Indian democracy. The link between economics and elections is much more important at the local government than the central government. And we are denied that fundamental need or fundamental prerequisite for transformation of this country. This is the stance that I want you to take very clearly. When it comes to the third part, culture as a soft power, when you combine politics, when you combine it with economics, the consequence is a social change that will allow consumer culture, a transformation from a very status quoist to a pro consumer economy. If India were to become a pro consumer driven economy, this transformation is extremely important. The transformation of a traditional city into inclusive cosmopolitan city. And Hyderabad is a decent example for that. Bangalore was too. But the value change that you will see, the discontent that the locals are feeling, is because there is no mutual respect, which is not the case in New York. You would see, because of the very fact that it was a global migration hub, it evolved into a space where intermingling of cultures created some sense of tolerance. You might be disagreeing with me, but let me give you a small fact. This person, Mamdani, he made very straightforward, blunt remarks which are very controversial. In the context of Israel, he was almost mentioning that he would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he steps in New York. It's a different question whether he will have that power or not. But the same Mamdani was actually in talks with the pro-Zionist groups, the New Yorkers who have a Israeli descent. They voted for him. How do you explain this paradox? So this is a takeaway for Indian politics too. You can disagree with some international stance, but at the same times, you can negotiate for mutual power exchange and focus on what is important for that moment, for that city. It is the same kind of uh, you know balance that you need to find between your opinion and reality. Your work should reflect your ability to negotiate and bring people together despite disagreeing with them. Talks a lot about your negotiation skills and your diplomatic skills. How did this happen? Because he focused on a simple agenda. Your life is not going to change with your opinion on Israel. It is not going to change with my opinion on Israel. It changes with my coming to power and you supporting me and we working together to solve that problem. The ability to compartmentalize these two different messaging and bring people together is one success. It's a different thing. Whether he'll be able to execute it or not is different. So, if you can make cities centers of this kind of a culture which is tolerant, which can compartmentalize emotive issues from logical issues, we can see faster growth. So, this dimension of culture as a soft power, as a symbolic representative of what we call as the modern. What is modernization? Modernization simply puts rational thinking at the center. Despite your identity, despite your opinions, if we can come together to address the problem, we can arrive at the solution faster. This is the lesson that you can learn from creating a culture for urban centers and why it is important to protect that culture. How can we create it? Again, through a open, vibrant democracy that respects migration, not as a burden, but as a opportunity for growth. Okay, so having affordable housing, having affordable transportation, planning for it, transit-oriented development, satellite townships, inclusive centers, all of this are part of creating this culture. If you are not addressing any of this part, it is difficult to create that culture. It is difficult to create that sense of inclusivity in this city. This is the lesson for Indian cities. Next, problem number 4. What is the role of opposition parties? This is from the GS2 polity dimension. Here we are talking about the quality of arguments and the ability to use the existing constitutional provisions and the conventional tools to hold the party in power accountable. Are we asking the right questions? If you are not able to deliver on the basics, the entire mobilization of opinion should be focused on that basic stuff. Are we able to move in the direction of jobs, education, skills, healthcare? If there are some problems, how can we make it better? How can you educate the public about the shortcomings? This should be the ideal agenda rather than all the submersive issues like which don't matter to the public. Here, the article also talks about the spectrum of political ideologies, which is there in GS1, communism, capitalism, etc. Right? So, in India, we talk about political parties right, left, center. Having an opinion and an ideology is your fundamental right, and you are free to do it. But as an aspiring bureaucrat, your ideology should solve a problem, not create it. In your essays, in your opinions, in the interviews, this fundamental premise should not be compromised. It doesn't matter what your opinion is or your ideology is. Is it serving the present and the future problems? Is it aiding? Is it helping in negotiating, persuading people? If you're wishing for a world that doesn't have differences, good luck. It's not going to happen. How can you navigate the world despite the differences? That is what this article can prove. Clear? And finally, will a mayor have an impact on the global politics? The answer is yes. The person can have an impact on a city as a global center. So it is an opportunity for young politicians. He's all of 34 years in India, and the entire world is looking at him. I'm not talking about the controversial remarks he has got to do with various political figures, his opinions on various global issues. I'm talking about the opportunity of youth in politics. Politics and ethics are not complementary, are not different, are not mutually exclusive. They're complementary. They can, they should go hand in hand, which is a GS4 question. It is not about what is right. It is about the reasoning that you have to convince people to get the job done. That is what we should be focused on. And the reasoning that we can take away is that we all have a common frustration. Let's focus on that. Any person who is able to negotiate and persuade and bring people together on this common platform to solve these issues is most likely to succeed. Okay? This is about his journey to the power. Now, coming to his remarks, are they called for, uncalled for? That's completely beyond the scope of this discussion. And your opinion about this person should only be restricted to this journey. The good part. The bad part, or according to you, what is the bad part, whatever that judgment is, should again come from action, which is too early now. We will only be able to tell through actions. But what is the impact? We can predict, we can extrapolate. Impact on various walks of life. So, together, when we are putting all these points, the takeaway is that Indian cities need a vibrant culture which is primarily driven by economic agenda that is not only inclusive in redistribution but also participation. You cannot afford to have a purely capitalistic urban center, because no matter how much AI and artificial intelligence based tech is going to come, it will not feed the cities if there is no human to consume. So we all need each other, and therefore the way forward for a sustainable urban agenda is what we know as the stakeholder capitalism, where the capitalistic proceeds are redistributed, if not completely, to a decent level where the basics are met. The quality of life and the definition behind it keeps on changing. If you can't provide a peaceful urbanization solution or transport solution, urban mobility solution, if the metros etc are crowded, you can't even expect a seat, they're crowded and uncomfortable, you cannot call it a permanent solution. So if you can create that infrastructure which makes people feel like, okay, this is livable, the so-called ease of living, that's what we should be focusing on. And this is the conclusion and the takeaway from this entire personal story of this person. Okay, it's a very interesting development, and that's the reason I wanted to tell the story of an Indian city through the lens of this election, because I have your attention. Everybody knows him now. It's in news, and that's why I wanted to use this example. Is the agenda very clear? Is it communicated clearly? If you have any problem in articulating it, you can go back to this and revisit the entire discussion. Okay, moving forward. All these cases, other issues are pretty straightforward and you can pretty much read them because we have covered them multiple times.